Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her back against the massive tree trunk, her breathing shallow and controlled. The alien forest of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly around her, its violet-tinged canopy filtering the orange light of the distant star into an otherworldly glow. 3 days had passed since the transport shuttle crashed, leaving her stranded on this supposedly uninhabited world with nothing but her survival kit and the clothes on her back. The sound that had been following her for the past hour came again, a soft rustling in the undergrowth, too deliberate to be wind, too careful to be coincidence. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to the emergency beacon clipped to her belt. The device showed no signal, just like it had for the past 72 hours. She was alone, 47 light-years from Earth, with something hunting her through an alien jungle. Sarah had studied xenobiology for 15 years before joining the Colonial Survey Corps. She understood predator behavior, had memorized the protocols for first contact with unknown species. But understanding something in theory and living it were entirely different experiences. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she listened to whatever was tracking her move through the forest with practiced silence. The rustling stopped. Sarah held her breath, counting the seconds. 10, 20, 30. Just as she began to relax, a low growl rumbled from somewhere behind the massive ferns to her left. It was a sound that spoke of intelligence, of calculation. This was not some mindless beast following instinct. Something was deliberately stalking her. Sarah broke from cover and ran. Her boots crashed through the alien undergrowth as she sprinted between towering trees that defied every law of botany she knew. Their bark was smooth as glass, colored deep purple with veins of silver that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The ground beneath her feet was spongy with moss-like organisms that glowed faintly when disturbed, leaving a trail of light in her wake. Behind her, the growling grew closer. Whatever was following her was gaining ground, moving through the forest with an ease that spoke of perfect adaptation to this environment. Sarah's lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, dodging low-hanging branches and leaping over fallen logs that steamed with organic decay. A clearing opened ahead, and Sarah burst into the open space without thinking. The moment she left the tree line, she realized her mistake. The clearing was perfectly circular, its edges defined by an unnatural ring of the glass-barked trees. At its center sat a structure that made her stop dead in her tracks. The building, if it could be called that, rose from the forest floor like a living thing. Its walls curved organically, growing from the ground in smooth, bone-white spirals that reached toward the alien sky. No human technology could have created such architecture. This was clearly the work of an intelligent species, and Sarah was trespassing in their territory. The growling behind her stopped. Sarah spun around, her eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The forest had gone completely silent. No insect sounds, no bird calls, nothing but the whisper of wind through alien leaves. The silence was more terrifying than any growl. Then she saw them. Eyes. Dozens of pairs of eyes watching her from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. They glowed with a soft amber light, positioned too high to belong to any quadruped, too wide-set to be human. As Sarah watched in frozen terror, the creatures began to emerge from their hiding places. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in fur that shifted color like oil on water. Their limbs were long and powerful, ending in hands that bore retractable claws. Their faces were feline, but elongated, with large eyes that held unmistakable intelligence. These were not mere animals. They were a sentient species, and she had wandered into what was clearly their sacred or ceremonial ground. The largest of the creatures stepped forward, its fur shifting from deep purple to silver as it moved. When it spoke, its voice was a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Sarah's chest. "Human," it said in perfect, accented English. "You have violated the sanctuary of the ancestors. The penalty for this transgression is death." Sarah's mind reeled. How did this alien know her language? How long had her species been observed without their knowledge? She forced herself to stand straight, drawing on every ounce of diplomatic training she possessed. "I am Dr. Sarah Chun of the Earth Colonial Survey Corps," she said, her voice steady despite her terror. "I crashed here 3 days ago. I meant no disrespect to your ancestors or your sanctuary. I was simply trying to survive." The large alien's ears flattened against its skull, clearly a sign of aggression in their body language. "Survival does not excuse desecration, human. Your kind's reputation for destruction precedes you. We have watched your expansion across the galaxy with growing concern." "You've been watching us?" Sarah asked, genuine curiosity overriding her fear. "For how long?" "Long enough to know that humanity leaves nothing but wasteland in its wake." Another alien spoke from the shadows. "This one was smaller. It's for a deep crimson. Your species consumes worlds like a plague, showing no respect for the life that came before." Sarah felt a flash of anger at the accusation, but she forced it down. These beings had clearly formed their opinion based on observation, and she couldn't deny that humanity's expansion had not always been gentle. But she also couldn't let their misconceptions go unchallenged. "You're right that we've made mistakes," she said carefully, "but we've also learned from them. The Colonial Survey Corps exists to study new worlds and their inhabitants before any settlement occurs. We're here to understand, not to conquer." The large alien, clearly their leader, made a sound that might have been laughter, but held no humor. "Understanding? Is that what you call the strip mining of Vega Prime? The industrial pollution of the Centauri waterways? Your understanding has proven quite profitable for your species." Sarah's heart sank. They were right about those disasters, though she had played no part in them. Early human expansion had been driven by desperation and greed, with little thought for conservation or cooperation. But that had changed, hadn't it? The protocols existed now. The safeguards were in place. "Those were mistakes made by earlier generations," she said. "We've established new protocols." "Silence," the leader growled, and Sarah's words died in her throat. "Your presence here proves that nothing has changed. You crash on our world and immediately begin trampling through our most sacred spaces. Even now, you stand in the center of our ancestors' grove, speaking of your good intentions while your boots crush the memorial flowers of our dead." Sarah looked down in horror. The ground beneath her feet was indeed covered with tiny, luminescent blossoms that she had been too panicked to notice. Each step had crushed dozens of them, and their broken stems leaked a silvery substance that glowed like tears. She was standing in the middle of their cemetery, destroying their memorial flowers with every breath. "I didn't know," she whispered, carefully stepping to one side. "I'm sorry. I'll leave immediately." "You will leave," the leader agreed, "but not alive. Your death will serve as a message to your kind. This world is not for taking." The circle of aliens began to close in, their claws extending with soft clicking sounds. Sarah's hand moved to her survival knife, but she knew it would be useless against so many opponents. These creatures were clearly natural predators, and she was hopelessly outmatched. Then a new sound cut through the tension, a high, chittering call from the forest behind the aliens. Every head turned toward the sound, and Sarah saw something that made her heart skip a beat. A small figure was struggling in the undergrowth at the forest's edge, caught in what looked like a metallic snare. It was clearly a juvenile of their species, smaller than the adults, but with the same basic anatomy. Its fur was a pure, unmarked silver, and its calls held a note of pain and terror that transcended species barriers. The young alien was caught in some kind of trap, and it was clearly suffering. Without thinking, Sarah broke from the circle of adults and ran toward the trapped youth. Behind her, she heard the leader roar in anger, but she ignored it. Her xenobiology training had taught her that helping the young was a universal instinct, one that might give her a chance to prove her intentions. The snare was clearly not of alien manufacture. The metal was too crude, the design too simple. It looked like something from early human colonial equipment, probably left behind by an unauthorized survey team. The wire was cutting into the young alien's leg, drawing silvery blood that glowed in the forest's strange light. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the trapped creature, pulling her multi-tool from her belt. The young alien's eyes went wide with terror as she approached, and it tried to scramble away from her. But the snare held it fast, and its struggles only made the wire cut deeper. "Easy," Sarah said softly, the way she would speak to a frightened animal. "I'm going to help you." She could hear the adult aliens approaching behind her, their growls growing louder with each step. Time was running out. Sarah carefully examined the snare mechanism, looking for the release point. The trap was spring-loaded, designed to tighten when pulled against. But there was a small lever hidden under the base plate, a safety release that would open the jaws instantly. Sarah's fingers found the lever just as powerful claws gripped her shoulders. She pressed the mechanism and heard the satisfying click of the trap opening. The young alien immediately pulled its leg free, scrambling away from both the trap and the strange human who had freed it. The adult aliens hauled Sarah to her feet, their claws digging into her jacket. The leader's face was inches from hers, his amber eyes blazing with fury. "A clever trick, human," he snarled. "You think saving one of our young will spare your life?" "I didn't do it to spare my life," Sarah replied honestly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. That trap wasn't made by your people. It was human technology. My people's technology. We're responsible for that suffering, and I couldn't stand by and watch it continue." The leader's grip loosened slightly, confusion replacing some of the anger in his expression. "You freed Kira without thought for your own safety?" Sarah looked toward the young alien, Kira, who was now hiding behind one of the adults while favoring her injured leg. "I've dedicated my life to studying alien life forms because I believe every sentient being has value. Watching any creature suffer goes against everything I believe in." The leader studied Sarah's face for a long moment, and she could see the calculation in his alien features. Finally, he released her shoulders and stepped back. "You speak of responsibility for the suffering caused by your people's technology," he said slowly. "This is unexpected. Most humans we have observed show no concern for the damage they cause to others." "Then, you haven't been observing the right humans," Sarah replied. "Yes, my species has made terrible mistakes. We've caused immense suffering through ignorance and greed. But many of us are working to change that. The Colonial Survey Corps exists specifically to prevent the kind of damage you're talking about." The crimson-furred alien who had spoken earlier moved closer, its posture still aggressive, but no longer openly hostile. "Your words are easy to speak, human. Actions reveal truth where words conceal it." Sarah nodded. "You're absolutely right. And my actions today were clumsy and destructive, even if they weren't intentionally malicious. I damaged your memorial garden because I was running in panic instead of taking time to understand my surroundings. That's on me." She turned to address the group as a whole. "I know my apology can't undo the damage I've caused, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to try to make things right. I have some medical supplies in my kit that might help with Kira's injury, and I could help you remove any other human traps that might be in the area." The leader's ears twitched, what Sarah hoped was a sign of consideration rather than continued aggression. "You would delay your own rescue efforts to help repair damage caused by your species?" "My rescue efforts aren't going anywhere," Sarah said with a rueful smile. "My emergency beacon isn't working, and I have no idea where the nearest human outpost might be. I could be stranded here for months before anyone finds me. In that time, I'd rather be useful than destructive." Kira suddenly spoke from her hiding place, her voice high and musical despite her obvious pain. "She could have run when the snare opened," she said in the same accented English the adults used. "Instead, she stayed to make sure I was truly free. Mother, she smells of truth-telling." The crimson-furred alien, apparently Kira's mother, approached cautiously. "You could detect truth scent in aliens, my daughter." "It is the same as with our own people," Kira replied. "Fear and lies create bitter scents. Kindness and truth smell like the memorial flowers. The human smells of truth. Sarah filed away this fascinating information about their species' olfactory capabilities while the adults debated among themselves in their own language. Their discussion was quick and filled with gestures, clearly a heated debate about what to do with the unexpected human. Finally, the leader turned back to Sarah. "I am Thane Dracker of the Silver Moon clan," he said formally. "The injured young one is Kira, daughter of Hunter Zura. You have created a significant problem for us, Dr. Sarah-chan." "How so?" Sarah asked. "By saving our young without thought for your own safety. You have invoked the law of life debt," Dracker explained. "Kira now owes you her continued existence. This creates obligations that extend far beyond what we originally intended for your fate." Sarah felt a glimmer of hope, though she tried not to let it show on her face. "What kind of obligations?" "The clan is now required to offer you protection and hospitality until the debt can be properly repaid," Zara said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely pleased with this development. "It is an ancient law, older than our first contact with the stars. However," Dracker added with a warning growl, "this protection comes with conditions. You will be watched constantly. Any sign of deception or hidden agenda will result in immediate termination of our agreement. And you will be required to prove your stated intentions through action, not merely words." Sarah nodded eagerly. "I understand completely. What would you need me to do?" "First," Dracker said, "you will help us locate and disable any other human traps in our territory. Second, you will submit to our customs and laws while you remain with us. Third, you will share your knowledge of human expansion plans so that we can better protect our world from future incursions." "I can agree to the first two immediately," Sarah said. "The third might be more complicated. I don't have access to classified colonial survey information, and much of our expansion planning happens far above my security level. But I can share everything I do know about our protocols and procedures." Dracker exchanged looks with the other adults, and Sarah caught several gestures that seemed to indicate grudging approval. "Very well," he said finally. "But understand this, Dr. Sarah-chan. Your life now depends entirely on your ability to prove that humanity can be trusted to respect the lives and rights of other sentient species. Should you fail in this demonstration, your death will serve as our final judgment on your entire species." The weight of his words settled on Sarah like a heavy blanket. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival anymore. She was somehow representing all of humanity in the eyes of these aliens. The responsibility was terrifying, but also strangely exhilarating. This was exactly the kind of first contact scenario she had trained for, dreamed of participating in. "I understand the weight of what you're asking," she said, "and I accept the responsibility. But I should warn you, I'm just one human. My actions can only represent my own character and beliefs, not those of my entire species." "Perhaps," Dracker said, "but they may represent the potential of your species. We will observe carefully." Zara stepped forward, her posture still wary, but no longer openly hostile. "First, we will tend to my daughter's wounds. You mentioned medical supplies?" Sarah immediately pulled her survival kit from her pack, removing the small medical module. "I have antiseptic, pain relievers, and synthetic bandages. I'm not sure how compatible our biochemistries are, but basic wound care should be universal." As she knelt beside Kira to examine the injury, Sarah realized that her entire life had just changed. 3 days ago, she had been a simple xenobiologist on a routine survey mission. Now she was humanity's unofficial ambassador to an advanced alien species, with a weight of interstellar relations resting on her shoulders. The young alien's leg was badly bruised, but not seriously damaged. As Sarah cleaned the wound with gentle efficiency, she found herself wondering what the next few days would bring. One thing was certain: she was about to learn more about alien culture and psychology than any human in history. Behind her, she could hear the adult aliens discussing plans in their own language. Though she couldn't understand the words, their tone had shifted from hostile to cautiously cooperative. It was a start, at least. Whether it would be enough to save both her life and humanity's reputation remained to be seen. As Sarah finished bandaging Kira's leg, the young alien looked up at her with those large amber eyes and spoke in a whisper that only Sarah could hear. "Thank you, Starwalker," she said, using what was clearly a formal title. "You have shown that kindness can exist between the stars." Sarah smiled despite their dangerous situation. Perhaps there was hope for peaceful contact between their species, after all. The Silver Moon Clan settlement was unlike anything Sarah had imagined possible. Built into the living trees themselves, their dwellings grew from the massive trunks like organic sculptures. Walkways spiraled up through the canopy, connecting dozens of pod-like chambers that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. The entire city seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the forest, a perfect harmony between civilization and nature. Sarah walked carefully along one of the main pathways, acutely aware of the dozens of amber eyes following her every movement. Word of the humans' arrival had spread quickly through the settlement, and curious clan members lined the walkways to catch a glimpse of the alien visitor. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility, though none made any threatening moves in the presence of Thanedracker. Kira bounced alongside her, seemingly recovered from her injury and fascinated by their unusual guest. Her youthful enthusiasm was a welcome contrast to the wary adults, and she chattered constantly about everything they passed. "That is the Memory Grove," she said, pointing to a cluster of trees whose bark showed intricate carved patterns. "Each carving tells the story of one of our ancestors. Some are over 1,000 cycles old. And there is the council chamber, where the Thanes meet when important decisions must be made." Sarah tried to absorb every detail while maintaining the respectful demeanor that Dracker had demanded. The more she saw of their civilization, the more ashamed she felt about humanity's clumsy first impressions. These beings had achieved a level of environmental integration that human technology could barely dream of matching. "The young one talks too much," Zara muttered from behind them. "She will share all our secrets before the sun sets." "Knowledge shared in friendship creates bonds," Kira replied with the confidence of youth. "Knowledge hidden in fear creates enemies." Dracker's ears twitched in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as amusement. Wisdom from cubs often surpasses that of their elders. Perhaps we should listen. Their destination was a large chamber near the heart of the settlement, its walls lined with what appeared to be star charts and navigation equipment. Several other aliens worked at complex instruments, their claws dancing over controls with practiced precision. As the group entered, all activity stopped, and every head turned to stare at the human. "This is our observation center," Dracker explained. "From here, we monitor the movement of ships throughout this sector of space. We have been tracking human expansion for over 50 years." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the sophisticated equipment. The technology was clearly far in advance of anything humanity possessed, with displays showing real-time positions of ships across multiple star systems. Her own crash shuttle was marked with a pulsing red indicator on what was obviously a tactical display. 50 years, she repeated softly. "You've been watching us that long?" "Longer," said one of the technicians, his fur marked with the silver patches that seemed to indicate advanced age. "I am Keeper Torvin. I have been monitoring human space activity since your first crude fusion drives appeared beyond your home system. Your expansion has been instructive." The word instructive carried an ominous weight that made Sarah's stomach clench. "What kind of instruction?" Torvin gestured to one of the displays, which showed a complex timeline of human colonial activity. Red markers indicated conflicts, environmental damage, and failed settlements. Green markers showed successful colonies, but they were significantly outnumbered by the red ones. "Your species exhibits a pattern that we have seen before," Torvin explained with clinical detachment. "Initial expansion driven by desperation and resource scarcity, followed by increasingly aggressive colonization as population pressures mount. The pattern typically ends in either civilizational collapse or transformation into a galactic threat. Sarah studied the display, her heart sinking as she recognized many of the incidents marked in red. The Martian terraforming disaster, the Tau Ceti mining wars, the ecological collapse of 3 colony worlds due to invasive Earth species. The record was damning, and she couldn't argue with their conclusions based on the evidence presented. "You're right about our early mistakes," she admitted. "But you're only seeing part of the picture. What about the successful colonies? The conservation efforts? The new protocols we've established?" "Protocols?" Torvin made a sound that might have been skeptical laughter. "We have monitored your protocols being violated whenever they prove inconvenient. Your Colonial Survey Corps makes beautiful reports about environmental protection, then approves mining operations that devastate entire ecosystems." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she forced herself to remain calm. Some administrators do violate the protocols for profit, but that doesn't mean the entire system is worthless. There are many of us working within the system to enforce better standards. "Perhaps," Dracker said, "but your individual good intentions matter little if your governmental structure continues to prioritize resource extraction over conservation." "Show us something, Dr. Chun. Prove that humanity has evolved beyond the destructive patterns we have observed." The challenge hung in the air like a physical weight. Sarah looked around the room at the assembled aliens, seeing various degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and hostility in their expressions. How could she possibly prove humanity's worth when their own records showed so many failures? Then, her eyes fell on a particular display showing shipping patterns near the Vega system. Something about the data looked wrong. The freight tonnage numbers were far too high for normal commercial traffic, and the ships were following unusual routes that avoided the main space lanes. "Keeper Torvin," she said slowly, "these shipping patterns near Vega. Are you certain this data is accurate?" The elderly alien's ears pricked forward with interest. "Entirely certain." "Why do you ask?" Sarah studied the display more carefully, her training in resource logistics coming into play. "Because this looks like classic smuggling behavior. See how the ships are avoiding the standard shipping routes and making multiple stops at uninhabited systems? And the tonnage numbers suggest they're carrying much more cargo than they're declaring." She turned to face the group. "I think someone is conducting illegal mining operations in that sector, probably using undocumented workers and avoiding environmental oversight. This isn't approved colonial activity. It's criminal exploitation." Torvin exchanged glances with Dracker. "You can determine this from shipping patterns alone." "I specialize in colonial resource management before switching to xenobiology," Sarah explained. "I've seen these patterns before when investigating black market mining operations. Someone is stripping resources from Vega system worlds without any governmental oversight or environmental protection." The room fell silent as the aliens processed this information. Sarah could see the wheels turning in their minds, and she pressed her advantage. "This is exactly what I meant about the difference between official policy and criminal activity. Those ships aren't operating under colonial survey protocols. They're violating them. If you reported this to the colonial authority, they would shut down the operation and prosecute everyone involved." "You would have your own people arrested?" Zara asked with surprise. "Of course," Sarah replied firmly. "Breaking environmental protection laws is a serious crime. The penalties include heavy fines, imprisonment, and permanent bans from colonial space. Most humans take these laws very seriously." Kira had been listening to the exchange with fascination, her young mind clearly working through the implications. "So humans have both good ones and bad ones, just like any species?" "Exactly," Sarah said, grateful for the young alien's simple wisdom. "The bad ones get most of the attention because they cause the most damage. But there are many good ones working to stop them and repair the damage they cause." Dracker studied the displays for several long minutes, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned back to Sarah with what might have been the beginning of respect in his amber eyes. Your ability to identify criminal activity from our surveillance data is impressive, he admitted. It suggests a level of expertise that we had not expected to find in a simple survey scientist. Resource crimes were my specialty before I switched to xenobiology, Sarah explained. I spent 5 years investigating illegal mining and environmental violations. I only switched fields because I wanted to help prevent problems instead of just prosecuting people after the damage was already done. Interesting, Torvin mused. So you moved from enforcement to prevention. That suggests a philosophical evolution in your personal approach to these issues. It does, Sarah agreed. I realized that understanding alien ecosystems and establishing proper protocols was more effective than simply punishing people who violated inadequate rules. Zara stepped closer to the displays, her claws tracing patterns in the air as she analyzed the data. If what you say is true, then some humans are operating outside their own laws. How widespread is this criminal activity? Sarah considered the question carefully. More widespread than it should be, but less common than your surveillance data might suggest. The criminals operate in remote areas specifically to avoid detection by human authorities. So you're seeing a disproportionate sample of the worst human behavior because the good behavior happens in areas you're not monitoring. An observation bias, Torvin said with what sounded like grudging respect. We have been sampling from a population that excludes law-abiding activities. This is the significant methodological error. The admission seemed to cost the elderly alien considerable effort, but Sarah appreciated his intellectual honesty. It's a natural mistake when conducting covert surveillance. You have to observe from a distance, so you can only see activities that occur in isolated areas. Unfortunately, those areas are exactly where criminals prefer to operate. Drakkar made a gesture that Sarah didn't recognize, but the other aliens immediately began pulling up new data displays. Within minutes, the room was filled with star charts, shipping records, and communication intercept covering hundreds of human worlds. Show us, Drakkar commanded. Identify which of these activities represent legitimate colonial operations and which represent criminal violations. Sarah approached the nearest display, her mind already analyzing the patterns she saw. This was exactly the kind of work she had done for the Colonial Authorities Investigation Division, and the familiar challenge energized her despite their precarious situation. For the next several hours, Sarah worked through the surveillance data with growing excitement. The aliens' monitoring technology was incredibly sophisticated, capable of tracking individual ships across vast distances and intercepting commercial communications. With their data and her analytical skills, she could map criminal operations across the entire sector. This cluster near Proxima Centauri is definitely illegal, she said, pointing to a complex pattern of ship movements. See how they're making regular runs to uninhabited systems, but only filing manifest data for the final destinations? They're strip mining asteroids without environmental impact assessments. And this, Torvin asked, indicating another suspicious pattern. Weapons trafficking, Sarah replied without hesitation. The cargo tonnages are wrong for the declared cargoes, and they're avoiding all the systems with Colonial Authority monitoring stations. Someone is moving military-grade equipment to unauthorized buyers. As the analysis continued, a clear picture emerged. Criminal activity was indeed widespread in the outer colonies, but it was also clearly distinguishable from legitimate operations. More importantly, Sarah could see evidence that human authorities were actively working to combat these crimes. Patrol ships conducting searches, communication intercepts showing investigation activities, and shipping pattern changes that indicated successful enforcement actions. Your own people are hunting these criminals, Kira observed, her young eyes bright with understanding. Yes, Sarah confirmed. The Colonial Authority takes these violations very seriously. They just don't have enough ships to patrol such a vast area effectively. Drakkar had been silent throughout most of the analysis, but now he stepped forward to study the completed assessment. You have identified 17 different criminal operations that our surveillance had failed to properly classify, he said slowly. And you have shown evidence of active human enforcement efforts in 6 different sectors. The pattern is clear, Torvin added with what sounded like scientific fascination. Human civilization is indeed struggling with internal conflicts between legal and illegal resource extraction. The criminal elements are not representative of official policy. Sarah felt a surge of hope as she saw understanding dawning in their expressions. It's more than that, she said. The trend is moving in the right direction. Look at the temporal data. Illegal operations are becoming less common over time as enforcement improves and legal alternatives become more profitable. She gestured to a timeline display that showed the evolution of human activity over the past 2 decades. 20 years ago, maybe half of all outer colony activity was illegal or environmentally destructive. Today, it's down to less than 20%. Well, we're getting better. Improvement, Zara said thoughtfully. This suggests that your species is capable of learning from past mistakes. We are, Sarah said with quiet conviction. It takes time, and we make a lot of errors along the way. But we do learn. We do change. And there are many of us working very hard to make sure that change happens faster. The room fell silent as the aliens absorbed this new understanding of human civilization. Sarah could see them reassessing their previous conclusions, weighing the evidence of both human failures and human progress. Finally, Dracker spoke. This information changes our understanding significantly, he admitted. But it also raises new questions. If your authorities are genuinely committed to preventing environmental crimes, why do they not seek cooperation with affected worlds? Why do they not consult with native species before beginning extraction operations? Sarah winced at the question. Because most of the time, we don't know there are native species to consult with. Our detection methods for finding intelligent life are still fairly primitive. And when we do discover inhabited worlds, our first contact protocols are, well, they need improvement. Like crashing into sacred groves. Kira asked with what Sarah was learning to recognize as alien humor. Exactly like that, Sarah replied with a rueful smile. We're much better at analyzing rocks and atmosphere than we are at detecting signs of intelligent life. It's one of the reasons why the Survey Corps is expanding its xenobiology division. To prevent future incidents like your arrival here, Dracker asked. To prevent incidents, yes. But also to establish proper communication protocols when we do encounter intelligent species. What happened with me? A human accidentally violating sacred space and nearly getting killed for it. That should never happen again. Torvin gestured to the surveillance displays around them. Yet it will happen again, unless your people change their approach fundamentally. Your expansion continues to be driven by resource needs rather than scientific curiosity. Sarah nodded sadly. You're right. Population pressure and resource scarcity are still major factors in human expansion. But we're also beginning to see colonies established purely for scientific research or cultural exchange. It's a slow change, but it is happening. Perhaps, Dracker said. But change is not enough if it happens too slowly to prevent irreversible damage. How do we know that your people will not simply continue their current patterns until they have consumed every available resource? The question struck to the heart of Sarah's deepest fears about her own species. How could she prove that humanity would choose restraint over expansion when their entire history suggested otherwise? How could she convince them that her people were capable of wisdom when the evidence was so mixed? Then, she remembered something that might provide the answer they were looking for. May I show you something? She asked, pulling out her personal tablet. It's not classified information, just a research project I was working on before the crash. With growing excitement, Sarah called up the files for the Kepler 442 system survey that had brought her here. The preliminary data painted a picture of a world rich in rare minerals and perfect for human colonization. According to the initial reports, the planet was uninhabited and ripe for immediate development. This is why I was coming to your world, she explained. The initial survey showed valuable mineral deposits and no signs of intelligent life. According to our standard protocols, this should have been designated for immediate colonial development. The aliens examined the data with growing alarm, clearly recognizing the implications. Their world was exactly the kind of resource-rich target that human expansion typically focused on. But here's the important part, Sarah continued, pulling up her own research notes. I identified several anomalies in the biological surveys that suggested the presence of intelligence. The growth patterns of your cities, the artificial symmetry of clearings like your ancestors' grove, the sophisticated cultivation of specific plant species. She showed them her preliminary conclusions, which recommended delaying any development pending further investigation of possible native intelligence. My job was to spend 3 months here conducting a complete xenobiology survey before any colonial activity was approved. If I had been able to complete that survey and file my report, your world would have been classified as inhabited and placed under permanent protection. The implications of this revelation seemed to hit all the aliens simultaneously. Drakker's ears flattened as he spoke. You are saying that your crash may have prevented the conquest of our world. Not conquered, Sarah corrected. Protected. Once a world is classified as inhabited by intelligent life, human law prohibits any colonial development without explicit consent from the native species. Your world would have been completely off-limits to human expansion. She could see the skepticism in their expressions, and she didn't blame them for doubting her claims. I know it's hard to believe, especially given what you've observed about our expansion patterns. But the laws exist and they are enforced. We've abandoned several planned colonies after discovering evidence of native intelligence. Abandoned? Zara asked. Voluntarily. Voluntarily and by law, Sarah confirmed. For example, the Gliese 667 system was going to be our largest mining operation outside the solar system. But preliminary surveys found evidence of an aquatic intelligence in the subsurface oceans of Gliese 667c. The entire project was scrapped, and the system was declared a protected zone. Torvin was already pulling up data on his surveillance equipment. Within moments, he had confirmed Sarah's claims about the Gliese system. This is accurate, he reported with obvious surprise. Large-scale human operations in that system ceased abruptly 3 cycles ago, with no subsequent activity. The law has teeth, Sarah said firmly. Violating the protection of an inhabited world is considered a crime against sapience, punishable by life imprisonment. Most humans would rather find a different world to colonize than risk that penalty. The revelation seemed to shift the entire dynamic in the room. For the first time since her arrival, Sarah could see genuine hope replacing suspicion in some of their expressions. So your people do have mechanisms for restraint, Dracker said slowly. Your expansion is not entirely driven by conquest. It's not driven by conquest at all, Sarah replied. It's driven by need, but it's governed by law. The challenge is making sure our detection methods are good enough to identify intelligence before any damage is done. That's why xenobiology is becoming so important to our expansion efforts. Kira had been listening to the entire conversation with rapt attention. Now, she spoke up with the directness that only the young could manage. So if Sarah completes her survey and reports that we live here, humans will leave our world alone forever? Forever, Sarah confirmed. It will become a protected zone under interstellar law. The young alien's eyes lit up with excitement. Then, we should help her complete her survey. The idea of helping Sarah complete her survey sparked immediate debate among the Silver Moon Clan leaders. While Kira's enthusiasm was infectious, many of the adults remained skeptical about trusting their world's future to human promises and alien laws they had never heard of before. The young one speaks without understanding the full consequences, growled Elder Maxis, his scarred hide showing the marks of many battles. How do we know this protection law exists beyond this human's claims? How do we know her people will honor it, even if it does exist? Sarah understood their skepticism completely. If the situation were reversed, she would be just as cautious about trusting the word of an alien stranger, especially one whose people had a track record of environmental destruction. "You don't have to trust me," she said carefully. "Your surveillance technology is clearly sophisticated enough to verify everything I've told you. Keeper Torvin, can your systems access human communication networks directly?" The elderly alien's ears perked with interest. "To some degree, yes. We can intercept commercial transmissions and access publicly available data networks." "Why do you ask?" "Because the Interspecies Protection Act is public law. The full text is available on every colonial authority database, along with case histories of its enforcement. You can verify its existence and see examples of its application without taking my word for anything." Dracker exchanged glances with Torvin, who immediately began working at his control console. Within minutes, the main display showed streams of intercepted human data transmissions, legal databases, and administrative communications. "Guide me," Torvin said simply. "Show me where to find this law." For the next hour, Sarah helped the aliens navigate through human legal and administrative databases. The process revealed far more than just the existence of the Protection Act. It showed them the entire framework of environmental and interspecies law that had evolved in response to humanity's early colonial mistakes. "This is extensive," Torvin muttered as they scrolled through hundreds of pages of regulations, enforcement guidelines, and case studies. "Your people have created quite detailed restrictions on their own expansion activities." "Because we learned from our mistakes," Sarah replied. "Every environmental disaster, every conflict with indigenous species, every colonial failure led to new laws and better protocols. The system isn't perfect, but it exists and it works." They found the specific case files for abandoned colonies, including the Glee's 667 example Sarah had mentioned. The documentation was thorough and publicly available, showing how the discovery of aquatic intelligence had led to immediate suspension of all colonial activity and permanent protection status for the entire system. "Remarkable," Elder Maxis said grudgingly. "Your people voluntarily abandoned what appears to have been a highly profitable operation based solely on evidence of native intelligence." "Not just profitable," Sarah corrected. "Essential. The rare Earth deposits in that system would have solved our resource shortages for the next century. Abandoning it was economically devastating for several major corporations. Yet they accepted this economic damage rather than violate the law." Zara asked with obvious surprise. "They had no choice. Public opinion wouldn't have tolerated the violation of a protected species, and the legal penalties would have destroyed them completely. Sometimes economic self-interest and ethical behavior align perfectly." Kira had been studying the case files with fascination. "The aquatic beings never even knew humans existed," she observed. "Humans protected them without any possibility of reward or thanks." "That's the point of the law," Sarah explained. "Protection based on the inherent value of intelligence, not on political or economic considerations. It's one of the few human laws that has near-universal support across all our worlds." The revelation of human legal protections seemed to shift the clan's entire perspective on the situation. What had begun as a discussion of immediate survival was evolving into a broader conversation about interspecies relations and long-term coexistence. "Let us assume for the moment that this protection law is genuine and enforceable," Dracker said carefully. "What would completing your survey actually involve? What would you need to document about our civilization?" Sarah pulled out her research tablet and called up the standard xenobiology survey protocols. "The requirements are actually fairly straightforward. I need to document evidence of intelligence, social organization, technology use, environmental integration, and cultural sophistication. Most of that I've already observed just in the past day." She showed them the preliminary notes she had been taking since her arrival. "Your architectural integration with living trees demonstrates both intelligence and environmental harmony. Your star charts and surveillance technology show advanced scientific capability. Your social structures, clans, councils, laws indicate sophisticated governance. And Your language abilities prove high intelligence. You have been documenting our society? Maxis asked with an edge of suspicion in his voice. Only the basics required for the protection filing, Sarah replied quickly. Nothing detailed, nothing that could be used for exploitation. The law specifically prohibits gathering intelligence data beyond what's necessary to establish protection status. Torvin had been following the conversation while continuing to explore human databases. According to these records, the survey requirements are indeed minimal, he confirmed. The focus appears to be on establishing protection rather than gathering exploitable information. Exactly, Sarah said with relief. The goal is to create a legal barrier against exploitation, not to provide a roadmap for it. Most of the survey is actually about documenting your environmental integration to show that your presence is beneficial rather than harmful to the planetary ecosystem. This point seemed to resonate strongly with the aliens, whose entire civilization was built around harmony with their forest environment. Sarah could see understanding dawning in their expressions as they realized that human protection law might actually value their approach to planetary stewardship. Your people would protect our world because we protected ourselves? Kira asked with growing excitement. Among other reasons, yes. Civilizations that successfully integrate with their planetary environment are considered especially valuable for preservation. They represent knowledge and techniques that could benefit everyone. Elder Maxis leaned forward with new interest. Explain this further. How would our environmental integration be valuable to your people? Sarah smiled, sensing she was finally reaching common ground with the skeptical elder. Human colonial policy has evolved beyond simple resource extraction. We're increasingly interested in learning sustainable development techniques from species that have achieved long-term environmental balance. Your tree cities, your biotechnology, your symbiotic relationship with the forest ecosystem. These represent solutions to problems we're still struggling with. You want to learn from us rather than simply avoiding us? Zara asked. Both, actually. The protection law would prevent any colonial development on your world, but it also opens the door for scientific and cultural exchange if both species are interested. Many protected worlds have voluntary cooperation agreements that benefit everyone involved. Torvin's research had turned up examples of these cooperation agreements, and he projected several case studies onto the main display. The results were impressive. Protected worlds that had chosen limited contact with humanity had gained access to advanced medical technology, interstellar communication networks, and expanded scientific knowledge, while contributing their own expertise in areas where human knowledge was lacking. The Centauran Collective developed terraforming techniques that we now use throughout the outer colonies, Sarah explained, pointing to one of the case studies. In exchange, they gained access to our quantum communication technology and medical databases. Both species benefited enormously, and their world remained under their complete control. Dracker asked, completely. The cooperation agreement specifically prohibited any human settlement or resource extraction on their worlds. All collaboration took place either in space stations or on designated human worlds where they felt comfortable visiting. The aliens spent several minutes discussing these possibilities among themselves in their own language. Sarah caught occasional words that sounded familiar, but the rapid conversation was far beyond her limited understanding of their tongue. Finally, Dracker turned back to her with what looked like cautious optimism. These examples suggest that contact with humanity need not result in the loss of our independence or our way of life. That's exactly right, Sarah confirmed. Modern human contact protocols are based on respect for sovereign species and mutual benefit. The days of conquest and exploitation are over. They're not just illegal now, they're economically and politically impossible. Because of laws like this Protection Act? Maxis asked. Laws, economics, and culture, Sarah replied. The economic benefits of cooperation far exceed the profits from exploitation. The legal penalties for violations are severe enough to deter most potential criminals. And, culturally, Most humans now view other intelligent species as valuable partners rather than obstacles to expansion. Kira had been listening to the entire conversation with growing excitement. "Mother," she said to Zura, "if Sarah completes her survey and files her report, our people could learn about the stars while keeping our forest safe. We could have both protection and knowledge." Zara's maternal instincts were clearly warring with her protective suspicions. "The potential benefits are significant," she admitted. "But so are the risks. What happens if this human's people choose not to honor their own laws? What happens if criminals like those we observe in the surveillance data decide our world is worth the risk of legal punishment?" It was a valid concern, and Sarah took it seriously. "The protection law has enforcement mechanisms," she explained. "Protected worlds are monitored by automated surveillance systems that detect any unauthorized approach. Violation attempts trigger immediate military response from the colonial fleet." "Military response?" Draker's ears flattened slightly. "Not against you," Sarah clarified quickly. "Against anyone who tries to violate your protected status. The colonial fleet takes these violations very seriously because they threaten the entire legal framework that governs human expansion. They will hunt down and prosecute anyone who attempts illegal operations on a protected world." Torvin had been verifying these claims through the human databases, and he nodded confirmation. "The enforcement records show multiple cases of military intervention against violators. The penalties appear to be consistently applied regardless of the political or economic status of the violators." "Equal justice under law," Sarah said. "It's one of humanity's core principles, even if we don't always live up to it perfectly." The conversation continued for several more hours as the aliens explored every aspect of human law, culture, and expansion policy they could access through their surveillance systems. Sarah found herself serving as both translator and cultural interpreter, helping them understand the context behind the legal frameworks they were discovering. By late afternoon, a consensus was beginning to emerge among the clan leaders. While they remained cautious about trusting humanity's long-term intentions, they were becoming convinced that completing Sarah's survey offered their best chance for protecting their world while maintaining the option for future beneficial contact. "We have reached a preliminary decision," Dracker announced formally. "The Silver Moon clan is willing to assist Dr. Sarah Chun in completing her xenobiology survey, with the understanding that this survey will result in permanent protection status for our world under human law." Sarah felt a surge of relief and gratitude. "Thank you for trusting me with this responsibility. I promise to complete the most thorough and accurate survey possible." However, Dracker continued with a warning note in his voice, "Our cooperation comes with conditions. You will be accompanied at all times by clan guardians. You will document only what is necessary for the protection filing and nothing more. And you will submit all survey data to our review before transmission to your authorities." "Those are completely reasonable conditions," Sarah agreed immediately. "I want you to be confident that the survey serves your interests, not just human law." Elder Maxis stepped forward with a document that appeared to be carved on some kind of metal tablet. "We have prepared a formal agreement outlining these conditions and your obligations while operating under our protection. This agreement will be binding under both human and clan law." Sarah accepted the tablet with appropriate ceremony, though she couldn't read the intricate script carved into its surface. "I'm honored by your trust, but I should mention that I can't read your language." "The document exists in both languages," Torvin explained, showing her a human-readable version on his display screen. "We have been monitoring your communications long enough to develop translation protocols." The agreement was surprisingly sophisticated, covering everything from data security to cultural sensitivity requirements. It was clear that the aliens had given considerable thought to protecting their interests while still allowing the survey to proceed. "This is very thorough," Sarah said after reviewing the terms. "You've anticipated problems I hadn't even considered. I agree to all conditions and restrictions." Kira practically bounced with excitement as the formal agreement was concluded. "When do we start the survey?" Can I help guide you to the interesting places? There's so much I want to show you. We start tomorrow at dawn, Dracker decided. Tonight, Dr. Chun will rest and prepare her equipment. Tomorrow, we begin the work that may determine the future relationship between our species. As the formal meeting concluded and the aliens began to disperse, Sarah found herself alone with Kira and Zara. The young alien's enthusiasm was infectious, but her mother remained more reserved. You understand the weight of what you have undertaken? Zara asked seriously. I do, Sarah replied. I'm documenting not just your civilization, but potentially the foundation for peaceful contact between our species. It's the most important work I've ever done. And if your people choose not to honor their laws, if they find ways around the protections you describe, Sarah met the mother's concerned gaze directly. Then, I will spend the rest of my life fighting to make them honor those protections. Your daughter saved my life by helping me understand your people. Now I have the chance to protect her world. I won't waste that opportunity. Kira looked up at both adults with a wisdom that sometimes comes from youth. Maybe this is how real peace begins, she said thoughtfully. Not with governments or armies, but with individuals who choose to trust each other. As night fell over the alien forest, Sarah prepared for sleep in quarters provided by the clan. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and the most important survey work of her career. But for the first time since her crash, she felt genuine hope for the future. The young alien who had been stalked by a hunter cub in the forest had become her strongest ally in bridging the gap between two very different species. And perhaps with careful work and mutual respect, that bridge could support the weight of lasting peace. The survey began at first light with a precision that impressed Sarah beyond anything she had expected. The Silver Moon clan had spent the night preparing detailed plans for documenting their civilization, organizing everything with the efficiency of a people who understood exactly what was at stake. Kira bounded alongside Sarah as they followed a carefully planned route through the Tree City. Her excitement barely contained as she pointed out architectural details that demonstrated her people's sophisticated understanding of biotechnology. Each building had been grown rather than constructed, with living trees shaped and guided into complex forms that served multiple functions. The walls breathe with the trees, Kira explained as they examined a residential pod that pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. In summer, they provide cooling. In winter, they store heat from the day, and they filter the air constantly, removing any pollutants while adding moisture and beneficial compounds. Sarah documented every detail with growing amazement. The aliens hadn't just achieved harmony with their environment. They had created a technological civilization that actively improved the planetary ecosystem. The implications for human colonial development were staggering. The root systems are integrated throughout the settlement, Zara added, her maternal pride evident as she watched her daughter serve as guide. Information flows through the network like nutrients, connecting every dwelling to the central knowledge systems. We can communicate instantly across the entire city without any artificial technology. Biological internet, Sarah murmured, making detailed notes. This could revolutionize human understanding of biotechnology integration. Their first major stop was the Memory Archive, a massive tree whose hollow interior had been shaped into a cathedral-like space filled with living murals. The walls themselves told the history of the clan through patterns of bioluminescence that shifted and flowed like movies projected onto organic screens. Each pattern contains thousands of years of history, explained archive keeper Nalith, an elderly alien whose fur had turned completely silver with age. The trees remember everything: births, deaths, discoveries, wisdom gained and lost. This is why the Ancestors' Grove is so sacred. It contains the memories of all who came before. Sarah watched in fascination as Nalith touched specific sections of the wall, causing detailed historical scenes to play out in brilliant light. The story of their species unfolded before her eyes, their evolution from forest hunters to tree dwellers to stargazers who built their entire civilization around preserving and protecting their world. How long have your people been spacefaring? Sarah asked as she documented the historical displays. We achieved starflight over 2,000 years ago, Nalith replied. But we chose not to expand beyond this system. Everything we needed was here. Why risk destroying other worlds when we could perfect our harmony with this one? The philosophical implications of this choice struck Sarah powerfully. While humanity had spread across the galaxy driven by resource needs and population pressure, the Silver Moon Clan had consciously chosen sustainable development over expansion. They represented a completely different model of technological civilization. Your people never felt the urge to explore other worlds, to establish colonies, or expand your territory. We explored, Dracker said, joining the conversation. But exploration for knowledge is different from expansion for resources. We studied dozens of systems, learned much about the universe, and then returned home to apply that knowledge to improving our world. Kira was practically vibrating with excitement as they moved through the archive. Show her the first contact protocols, she urged. Show her how we prepared for meeting other intelligent species. Nalith's ancient eyes twinkled with what might have been amusement. The young one anticipates my planned demonstration. She touched another section of the wall, and new patterns flowed across the surface. The images showed detailed protocols for peaceful contact with unknown species. Careful observation, non-interference, gradual introduction, respect for cultural differences. Sarah realized with growing amazement that the Silver Moon Clan had developed comprehensive first contact procedures centuries before humanity had even achieved spaceflight. You've been preparing for this moment for generations, she said softly. We hope for it, Nalith confirmed. We believe that intelligence was probably common throughout the galaxy, and that eventually we would encounter species capable of peaceful interaction. We wanted to be ready to offer friendship rather than conflict. But you've also been preparing for the alternative, Sarah observed, noting the defensive capabilities that were subtly integrated throughout their settlement. Your surveillance systems, your hidden weapons emplacements, your ability to monitor human activities from a distance. You're ready for war as well as peace. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, Dracker said with approval for her observation skills. Your species' expansion patterns suggested that contact might not be peaceful. We wanted to be ready for either possibility. As the survey continued through the day, Sarah began to understand the true sophistication of Silver Moon Clan civilization. Their technology was so seamlessly integrated with natural systems that it was almost invisible to human detection methods. No wonder the preliminary surveys had missed all signs of intelligence. The aliens had achieved technological development that enhanced rather than replaced natural processes. Their next stop was the Environmental Management Center, where clan scientists monitored and guided the ecological balance of the entire continent. Sarah watched in fascination as teams of researchers tracked weather patterns, animal migrations, plant growth cycles, and mineral flows with precision that exceeded anything in the human colonial toolkit. We maintain active management of 17 different ecosystems across 4 climate zones, explained Chief Ecologist Voren, his fur marked with the green patches that apparently indicated scientific specialization. Every intervention is carefully calculated to enhance natural processes rather than disrupt them. How do you handle population pressure? Sarah asked, thinking of humanity's constant struggle with resource limitations. What happens when your population grows beyond the sustainable capacity of your environment? Population growth is self-regulating, Voren explained. When resources become scarce, our birth rate naturally decreases until balance is restored. It is an instinctive response that evolved over millions of years of forest life. Sarah made careful notes about this biological population control mechanism, recognizing its enormous implications for human colonial planning. A species that naturally regulated its own population growth would never face the expansion pressures that drove human interstellar spread. But what about technological advancement? She pressed. Don't your discoveries create new capabilities that could disrupt existing balances? All new technologies are tested extensively for ecological impact before implementation, Vorin replied. We have rejected many potentially beneficial advances because their environmental costs were too high. Some knowledge is too dangerous to use. Kira had been listening to this conversation with growing interest. Is that why humans expand to new worlds? She asked Sarah. Because you don't have natural population control? Partly, Sarah admitted. We also develop technologies faster than we can evaluate their environmental impact. By the time we understand the consequences, we're often committed to expansion as the only solution to resource pressure. A trap of your own making, Dracker observed. Your intelligence allows you to develop beyond your biological limitations, but without the instinctive restraints that would keep that development sustainable. That's a very insightful analysis, Sarah said. It's exactly why cooperation between our species could be so valuable. You've solved problems that we're still struggling with. As afternoon progressed into evening, the survey took them to the most impressive site yet, the Planetary Observatory, where Silver Moon clan scientists studied distant stars and monitored galactic civilization. The facility was built into a massive tree that had been shaped into a living telescope, its organic lenses capable of incredible resolution and sensitivity. We have been watching the rise and fall of galactic civilizations for over 1,000 years, senior astronomer Kellis explained as she demonstrated the observatory's capabilities. We have seen patterns that repeat across species and time, expansion, conflict, collapse, and sometimes, rarely, transcendence to sustainable stability. The main display showed a galactic map marking hundreds of worlds where civilizations had risen and fallen over the centuries. Red markers indicated extinct civilizations, yellow showed declining ones, green represented stable societies, and rare blue markers indicated species that had achieved what Kellis called transcendence, technological advancement combined with perfect environmental harmony. Humanity is currently transitioning from red toward yellow, Kellis noted, indicating the human expansion zone. Your species is at a critical decision point. You can continue current expansion patterns until resource exhaustion forces collapse, or you can achieve the cultural evolution necessary for sustainable development. What determines which path a species takes? Sarah asked, studying the galactic patterns with fascination. Contact with transcendent species is the most reliable predictor of successful transition, Kellis replied. Species that learn sustainable technologies from others almost always achieve stability. Species that develop in isolation typically expand until they trigger environmental collapse. The implications were staggering. Sarah realized she was looking at evidence that interspecies cooperation wasn't just beneficial. It was essential for long-term survival. Species that remained isolated were doomed to eventual extinction, while those that learned from others could achieve permanent stability. You're offering to help humanity make this transition, she said with growing understanding. If your people are genuinely committed to ending their destructive expansion patterns, Dracker confirmed. The cooperation agreements you described could provide the knowledge transfer necessary for your species' survival. As evening fell, and the survey concluded for the day, Sarah reviewed her accumulated data with a sense of profound responsibility. She had documented not just an intelligent species, but a potential pathway to humanity's long-term survival. The protection filing would be just the beginning. The real value lay in what both species could learn from each other. Tomorrow we visit the Harmony Gardens, Kira announced as they prepared to return to the settlement. That's where we grow food and medicine and building materials all in the same space. And the wisdom pools, where young ones learn to communicate with the forest network. One more day should complete all the required documentation, Sarah said. But I'm beginning to think that will be just the beginning of what we can accomplish together. Zara had been unusually quiet throughout the day's activities, but now she spoke with obvious pride in her daughter's role. Kira has been an excellent guide. She understands instinctively what aspects of our culture will be most valuable to share. She's been perfect, Sarah agreed. She's helped me see your civilization through the eyes of someone who loves and understands it completely. That night, as Sarah prepared her preliminary survey report, she realized that her accidental crash on this world might prove to be the most fortunate event in human history. Not just because it would protect the Silver Moon clan from destructive colonial development, but because it opened the door to exactly the kind of knowledge transfer that could save both species from the tragic patterns that had destroyed so many galactic civilizations. The young alien who had been trapped by human technology had unknowingly become the key to breaking humanity free from its own technological traps. Tomorrow would bring the final documentation needed to ensure her world's protection. But, more importantly, it would lay the foundation for cooperation that could change the course of galactic history. Sarah fell asleep to the sound of the alien forest breathing around her, its bioluminescent network carrying information and nutrients through living channels that connected every tree to every other. Perhaps someday, she thought drowsily, humanity could learn to build civilizations that breathed with their worlds instead of consuming them. The survey was nearly complete, but the real work was just beginning. The final day of the survey brought unexpected visitors that changed everything Sarah thought she understood about the situation on Kepler 442b. She woke to urgent voices outside her quarters and the sound of multiple aircraft approaching through the forest canopy. Through her window, Sarah could see sleek vessels descending toward the Silver Moon settlement. Ships that were clearly not of human manufacture, but also distinctly different from anything she had seen of local technology. Kira burst into her quarters without ceremony, her usual enthusiasm replaced by barely contained excitement. "Star cousins have come," she announced breathlessly. 3 ships from the Harmony Federation. They want to meet the human who saved a hunter cub. Sarah quickly dressed and followed Kira through the settlement toward the landing area, trying to process this unexpected development. The Harmony Federation was completely unknown to human intelligence, another indication of how much they still didn't know about galactic civilization. The ships that had landed were marvels of engineering, their hulls seemingly grown rather than built, with the same organic curves and bioluminescent patterns she had seen in Silver Moon architecture. But the beings that emerged from them were unlike anything in her xenobiology training. The first delegation appeared to be aquatic in origin, sleek, dolphin-like beings in advanced life support suits that allowed them to function in the forest atmosphere. The second group resembled massive insects, their chitinous shells gleaming with metallic patterns. The third delegation was the most surprising of all. Humanoids so similar to humans that they could have passed for distant cousins, though their skin held a subtle luminescence, and their eyes were larger and more expressive than any humans. "Dr. Sarah Chun," Dracker said formally as they approached the landing area, "allow me to present the delegation from the Harmony Federation, representatives of the 3 species who first established the principles of cooperative galactic development." The lead aquatic being glided forward in what appeared to be a sophisticated mobility suit filled with luminous fluid. When it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that seemed to resonate through both air and water. "I am current singer title memory of the Cetacean Collective," it said in perfect English. "We have traveled here to witness the first peaceful contact between humanity and the Silver Moon clan." The insectoid delegation spokesperson clicked forward, its movements precise and economical. "I am high voice sharp clarity of the crystalline swarm," it announced, its speech carrying harmonic overtones that suggested multiple vocal cords. "We bring greetings from the Central Coordination." The humanoid leader stepped forward with a smile that was startlingly familiar despite the subtle differences in her features. "And I am Ambassador Luminaris Starweaver of the Radiant Republics," she said warmly. "We have been monitoring your survey with great interest, Dr. Chun." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to understand the implications of this gathering. 3 advanced spacefaring species, clearly working together in some kind of federation, had arrived specifically to observe her Xenobiology Survey. The scope of galactic civilization was far larger and more complex than humanity had ever imagined. "You've been monitoring my survey?" she asked carefully. "Your crash and subsequent contact with the Silver Moon clan created significant interest throughout the Federation," Luminera explained. "Humanity is approaching a critical transition point in its development, and the nature of this first peaceful contact could determine whether your species joins the community of cooperative civilizations or continues its current destructive expansion patterns." Current Singer title memory's aquatic suit pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as it spoke. The Federation has observed 17 species make this transition over the past millennium. 12 achieved successful integration with galactic civilization. 5 failed and ultimately destroyed themselves through unsustainable expansion. "What determines success or failure?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. High voice, sharp clarity's antennae twitched in what might have been the equivalent of a nod. "Species that demonstrate the capacity for genuine cooperation with other forms of intelligence invariably succeed. Species that view other intelligence as either obstacles or resources invariably fail." The weight of this assessment settled on Sarah like a physical burden. She was no longer just conducting a xenobiology survey or even representing humanity to a single alien species. She was apparently participating in a test that would determine humanity's entire future in galactic civilization. "No pressure," she murmured, earning what sounded like amused laughter from several of the alien delegates. "Actually, considerable pressure," Luminera admitted with a sympathetic smile. "But also considerable opportunity. The Silver Moon clan's positive assessment of your character and intentions has already influenced Federation opinion significantly. Few species achieve such rapid acceptance of their potential for cooperation." Dracker gestured toward the central meeting area of the settlement. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in more formal surroundings. Today's activities will determine not just the completion of Dr. Chen's survey, but the framework for future relations between multiple species." As they moved through the settlement, Sarah was struck by how easily the diverse alien delegations adapted to the Tree City environment. The aquatic beings glided through the elevated walkways with the grace of fish navigating coral reefs. The insectoids moved in perfect formation, their coordination suggesting some form of shared consciousness. The humanoids walked with an easy familiarity that suggested they had visited similar organic cities before. "The Harmony Federation has been working with the Silver Moon clan for over 3 centuries, Luminera explained, noticing Sarah's observations. "They were among the first species we contacted after achieving interstellar travel ourselves." "How many species belong to the Federation?" Sarah asked. "Currently 47, with 12 more in various stages of integration assessment," Current Singer title memory replied. "Each species contributes unique knowledge and capabilities to the collective benefit of all members." The formal meeting took place in the council chamber, where representatives of 5 different intelligent species gathered around a living table that grew from the tree floor itself. Sarah found herself at the center of attention as the most junior representative of the newest potential member species. "Dr. Chun," Luminera began formally, "the Federation has reviewed the preliminary reports of your survey activities and your interactions with the Silver Moon clan. We are here to observe the completion of your work and to discuss the possibilities for future cooperation between humanity and the Federation." "What kind of cooperation?" Sarah asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her nervousness. High voice, sharp clarity gestured to a holographic display that materialized above the table, showing a 3-dimensional map of local galactic space. "The Federation maintains a network of protected systems, research stations, and cooperative colonies throughout this region. Member species share technology, knowledge, and resources according to their capabilities and needs. No member species is required to abandon their homeworld or drastically alter their way of life," Current Singer title memory added. "Integration is based on voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit." Sarah studied the holographic map with growing amazement. The Federation's territory covered thousands of star systems, with trade routes, communication networks, and cooperative research projects linking dozens of different worlds and species. What would humanity need to do to be considered for membership? She asked. Demonstrate the ability to honor agreements with other intelligent species, Dracker replied. Beginning with the protection protocols you have promised for our world. Develop sustainable technologies that do not require constant expansion for survival, Luminera added. Most Federation species have achieved stable populations and renewable resource cycles. Show genuine respect for other forms of intelligence and environmental harmony, current singer Title Memory contributed. Species that view other beings as inherently inferior or exploitable cannot be trusted with advanced technologies. And prove the capacity for collective